What if everything you've been taught about the Civil War is wrong? A war where soldiers fought 400 battles but refused rank, where rifles too deadly to fire gathered dust, where armies missed 999 times out of 1,000, and a single lost shoe ignited a battle that doomed a nation. This is the Civil War you've never seen, where elephants nearly marched with Lincoln, where Christmas was stolen by Yankee monsters, where dysentery killed more men than glory, and brothers walked through hell on borrowed legs. Forget what the textbooks told you. This is a war of vanishing warships, of racist heroes and genocide hypocrites, of operas sung in prison camps, and a draft that outlasted starvation. A war where loyalty was a trap, truth was a casualty. And the deadliest weapon wasn't a bullet, it was a coffee bean. 30 mysteries, 30 lies, 30 reasons why history's bloodiest war still doesn't make sense. But before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. Among the most battle-hardened combatants of the Civil War, George Barnhart Zimpelman stands out as a particularly remarkable figure. Though eligible for promotion, he deliberately chose to remain a private throughout his service with the Confederate Army's famed Terry's Texas Rangers. Historical records document his extraordinary battlefield endurance, with participation in upwards of 400 separate engagements ranging from full-scale battles to minor skirmishes. Zimpelman achieved particular notoriety for his cavalry prowess, holding the regiment's highest record for mounts disabled beneath him during combat operations. His wartime injuries included 2 significant wounds, the first being a severe but recoverable injury, while the second resulted in permanent physical disability that impacted him throughout his post-war life. This combination of extensive combat exposure, deliberate humility in rank, and sacrificial wounding patterns makes Zimpelman an exceptional case study in frontline military service during the conflict. The Spencer repeating rifle's revolutionary breech-loading mechanism faced significant institutional resistance from Union procurement authorities during the Civil War's early years. Despite demonstrating clear technological superiority over standard muzzle-loading arms, Ordnance Department administrators initially blocked its adoption in 1860 through a combination of bureaucratic skepticism and operational conservatism. Their official rationale centered on concerns that rapid-fire capability would encourage infantrymen to expend cartridges recklessly, straining supply lines ill-prepared for modern ammunition consumption rates. This institutional hesitation delayed widespread field deployment until late 1863, with full-scale distribution only occurring during the conflict's final phases. Ironically, when finally issued to Union cavalry units in meaningful quantities, the Spencer's 7-round tubular magazine and swift reloading mechanism proved decisive in multiple engagements, fundamentally altering tactical realities even as War Department traditionalists continued privileging single-shot musketry for disciplined volley fire. Historical analyses of Civil War combat effectiveness reveal both Union and Confederate forces faced chronic marksmanship challenges with their standard-issue long arms. Contemporary military statisticians calculated staggering logistical inefficiencies stemming from this systemic ineffectiveness. Union ordnance analysts determined that neutralizing a single Southern combatant required firing sufficient rounds to expend approximately 240 pounds of gunpowder and 900 pounds of lead munitions. This startling ratio of 1 bullet for every 1,000 or more casualties reflects multiple compounding factors: the inherent limitations of muzzle-loading rifle muskets, minimal marksmanship training among hastily raised regiments, and the obscuring effects of black powder smoke on battlefields. Such ballistic inefficiency fundamentally shaped 19th-century warfare logistics, with Quartermaster Corps prioritizing raw material tonnage over precision targeting. a reality starkly at odds with modern assumptions about firearm lethality in this period. The American Civil War's pivotal engagements often emerged from unexpectedly mundane origins, with two of its most consequential clashes demonstrating how trivial factors could precipitate monumental bloodshed. The Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st to 3rd, 1863, later enshrined as the conflict's turning point, began not through strategic design but logistical desperation. Elements of General Henry Heth's Confederate division advanced toward the Pennsylvania hamlet, primarily to requisition footwear from rumored shoe factory stores, their tattered infantry units having marched hundreds of miles in barefoot conditions. This incidental probe unexpectedly collided with Union cavalry reconnaissance forces, escalating into the war's largest and costliest confrontation. Similarly, the Battle of Antietam-Sharpsburg, September 17, 1862, unfolded due to a chain of serendipitous errors. Confederate Staff Officer Captain Robert Chilton's casual disposal of Special Order 191, General Robert E. Lee's detailed campaign plans, wrapped around 3 premium cigars, transformed into a tactical intelligence windfall when discovered by Union Corporal Barton Mitchell in a Maryland field. This operational blueprint, revealing Lee's division of forces, temporarily galvanized the habitually deliberate General George McClellan to uncharacteristic aggression. The resulting clash near Antietam Creek became the single bloodiest day in American military history, claiming over 22,000 casualties while enabling Lincoln's transformative Emancipation Proclamation. Among the Civil War's most extraordinary non-human combatants soared Old Abe, the live bald eagle who served as avian mascot for Wisconsin's 8th Volunteer Infantry Regiment. This remarkable raptor entered military service through an 1861 barter agreement between Company C soldier Daniel McCann and a Chippewa tribesman, exchanged for 5 bushels of maize, a transaction reflecting frontier-era economic practices. The eagle developed an unusual bond with his unit, exhibiting canine-like loyalty by trailing soldiers through camp environments and perching attentively during drills. Old Abe's battlefield behavior became the stuff of regimental legend. During engagements like Corinth and Vicksburg, he would ascend in widening gyres as combat commenced, disappearing into the stratosphere until musketry subsided. Artillerymen from both armies reportedly paused firing to witness his majestic spirals, which sometimes reached altitudes rendering him virtually invisible. Despite this evasion strategy, shrapnel once grazed his wing during the 1863 siege of Vicksburg, the only injury sustained across 36 documented battles. Post-war, the veteran eagle became Wisconsin's living battle standard, residing in the state capitol building where attendants preserved his wild nature through daily raw meat feedings. Following his 1881 death, taxidermists immortalized Abe in a dynamic pose, recalling his airborne vigilance. After surviving a 1904 Capitol fire that destroyed his original display, the preserved raptor now occupies pride of place in the Wisconsin Veterans Museum, encircled by the battle flags he once inspired. A bronze replica tops the state's Civil War memorial, eternally scanning Madison's skies. The Walker siblings, Jack and Jasper from North Carolina, emerged as emblematic figures of Confederate resilience and post-war reconciliation. Enlisting in the 26th North Carolina Infantry Regiment, both brothers endured the fury of Pickett's charge during Gettysburg's climactic third day, July 3, 1863. Sustaining nearly identical shrapnel wounds to their lower limbs from Union artillery canister fire, they underwent crude field amputations using unsterilized bone saws, a grim standard of Civil War battlefield medicine. Captured during the Confederate retreat, their paths diverged through federal incarceration. Jack confined at Fort Delaware's notorious prison compound, while Jasper endured the lethal conditions of Camp Chase in Ohio. Post-Appomattox, the brothers returned to Reidsville, North Carolina, as pioneering users of innovative prosthetics. Their custom cork legs with articulated knee joints became local marvels, enabling their rise as respected merchants and civic leaders. Jasper's 1868 marital preparations took an unexpected turn when his prosthetic snapped during pre-ceremony preparations. In a display of fraternal ingenuity, he temporarily donned Jack's artificial limb, completing his vows while literally standing on his brother's support, an unprecedented occurrence in medical and marital history. This singular event, commemorated in local newspapers as the wedding on borrowed legs, symbolized both the physical toll of war and the adaptive bonds between veterans. The military saga of Sergeant Henderson Verdon epitomizes the intergenerational impacts of American warfare. Enlisting in the 2nd Arkansas Infantry Regiment at what contemporaries considered the advanced enlistment age of 25, this Tea Ridge native brought agricultural pragmatism to Confederate service. His unit's deployment through the Ozark foothills culminated tragically during the March 7th to 8th, 1862 Battle of Tea Ridge, later called Pea Ridge in Union records, where Verdon found himself defending his own homestead against Federal forces advancing along the Wire Road. During the chaotic retreat from Elkhorn Tavern, a Union .58 caliber Minié ball pierced his left lung before lodging against his spine, an injury sustained literally within sight of his corn crib. Carried into the farmhouse he'd built during his 1858 marriage, Verdon received unconventional medical care from his wife Lucinda. Her battlefield midwifery skills, honed delivering local children, proved vital in combating septicemia from the uncleaned wound. Their 3-month convalescence period, coinciding with spring planting season, unexpectedly produced son Wiley in December 1862, whose eventual 8 children would spawn a Marshall dynasty. The family's military legacy peaked with grandson Colonel John M. Verdon, who commanded a P-40 Warhawk squadron under Claire Chennault's 23rd Fighter Group, the famed Flying Tigers, during 1942's Burma campaign. As for Henderson, he defied medical prognoses by surviving 4 decades post-war, the lead projectile gradually migrating through his thoracic cavity, a living testament to Civil War trauma exhibited through his ritualized Friday afternoon back-stretching regimen to settle the damned Yankee souvenir. The peculiar naval engagement between the Confederate ironclad Arkansas and Union warship Carondelet at the Yazoo River's mouth on July 15, 1862, unfolded like a tactical paradox. Though the Arkansas's revolutionary iron plating deflected every Union cannonball, the Carondelet's crew executed a daring boarding maneuver, clambering onto the seemingly invincible Confederate vessel. To their bewilderment, they discovered the Southern sailors had retreated into the ship's fortified lower decks, sealing themselves behind impenetrable iron hatches. This left the Union boarding party stranded on an empty armored deck, victorious in occupation, yet unable to sabotage engines, commandeer artillery, or engage opponents. After hours of futile attempts to breach the sealed compartments, the Yankees reluctantly withdrew. Confederate crews later emerged unscathed, having outmaneuvered their foes through unconventional defensive tactics rather than direct combat. Both sides claimed partial success, the Union for technically capturing the deck, the Confederates for preserving their ship and crew. However, historians ultimately categorized the clash as indecisive, a rare Civil War draw where neither vessel sustained critical damage nor achieved strategic advantage. The Arkansas would meet its end weeks later through mechanical failure rather than enemy action, while the Carondelet's crew lamented their hollow boarding victory as a masterclass in frustration. The chromatic landscape of Civil War battlefields defies modern assumptions about standardized military attire. While popular memory codifies Union blue versus Confederate gray, the war's opening years witnessed a kaleidoscope of regimental uniforms that frequently crossed chromatic allegiances. Northern state militias initially deployed in locally procured garments, with the 3rd New York Volunteer Infantry parading in cadet gray frock coats trimmed with black velvet collars, nearly indistinguishable from the 8th Georgia Infantry's slate gray shell jackets at First Bull Run. Similarly, Vermont's 1st Brigade marched southward in butternut-dyed woolens that mirrored the hues of Appalachian Confederate units, while Indiana regiments adopted a distinctive iron gray that required officers to carry identification flags to prevent friendly fire incidents. This sartorial confusion reached its zenith with specialized units like the Tiger Rifles of Louisiana, whose blue-striped zouave pantaloons were accidentally replicated by the 1st Iowa Volunteer Infantry's quartermaster through a fabric procurement error. Even traditionally, northern states contributed to the chromatic chaos. Maine's 3rd Regiment campaigned in full gray until mid-1862, while Kansas Cavalry Scouts wore adapted Mexican-American war surplus uniforms in mottled charcoal. The war's most flamboyant exception emerged in New Jersey, where the 2nd Cavalry Battalion's sky blue jackets, paired with golden yellow facings, earned them the nickname Butterflies during the Peninsula Campaign. Ethnic regiments further complicated visual identification, particularly New York's 58th Infantry, nicknamed the Polish Legion, whose soldiers preserved national pride through crimson chapkas and white linen tunics during the 1864 Wilderness Campaign. This polychromatic reality persisted until 1863, when federal standardization efforts and Confederate supply shortages gradually enforced the now iconic color divide. The complex legacy of General Joseph E. Johnston, the Confederacy's senior field commander, encompasses both military scale and postbellum symbolism. His April 26, 1865, surrender to General William Tecumseh Sherman at Bennett Place, North Carolina, involved 89,270 Confederate troops across 3 armies, numerically surpassing Robert E. Lee's 28,000 at Appomattox by threefold. This often overlooked capitulation effectively dissolved the South's last major combat forces, though Johnston's post-war conduct would cement his historical significance beyond surrender statistics. Emerging as an unexpected avatar of reconciliation, Johnston served as honorary pallbearer at multiple Union generals' funerals, beginning with Ulysses S. Grant's 1885 New York Memorial. His most poignant act came February 19, 1891, when the 84-year-old former Confederate stood hatless in freezing rain during Sherman's Washington, D.C. funeral procession. Bystanders reported Johnston's refusal to cover his head despite colleagues' urgings, insisting, "If I were in his place and he standing here in mine, he would not put on his hat." This gesture of respect proved fatal. The resulting pneumonia claimed Johnston's life 3 weeks later, creating a symbolic bookend to their wartime relationship. If the Civil War was truly about keeping and spreading slavery, why did it take 3 years for the Emancipation Proclamation to be announced? What would have happened if the war had ended earlier? The Emancipation Proclamation only freed enslaved people in states that had rebelled, allowing Union-loyal states like Kentucky, Delaware, and West Virginia to keep slavery while still sending troops to fight the Confederacy. The conflict began primarily as a test of whether 11 Southern states could successfully form a separate nation. 4 of those states explicitly cited white supremacy in their official secession documents. However, Abraham Lincoln, the U.S. President, Fact 3, held racist beliefs. He stated, "I do not and never have supported social or political equality between white and black people. I oppose letting black people vote, serve on juries, hold office, or marry white people. There's a physical difference between races that I believe will always stop them from living as equals. Lincoln also said, I won't interfere with slavery where it already exists. I don't have the legal right or interest to do so. He argued that our government was created for people of the same background, claiming black and white coexistence endangered the nation. He warned that mixed-race children could weaken white supremacy. In 1860, America was largely white. As Lincoln's own words show, there was no clear division where one side wasn't racist and the other was, even if that's uncomfortable to admit today. Non-white people were denied citizenship, voting rights, and political office in both the North and South. If the South had stayed in the Union, war might have been avoided, since the North wasn't trying to abolish slavery. Northern businesses profited from cotton taxes and depended on Southern cotton for factories. Most Northern whites in the 1860s wouldn't risk their lives fighting for people they considered inferior. Union soldiers often shared the same racist attitudes as Southern troops. Some slave states even contributed soldiers to the Union Army. For the first 3 years, slavery was a secondary issue. The main goal was stopping Southern independence. The war, despite its bravery on both sides, was ultimately about whether the South could break away. For Fact 5, the Civil War was the deadliest in U.S. history, with over 620,000 deaths, more than all other American wars combined. The typical Confederate soldier was a white Southern man aged 15 to 60. Records show 89% of these soldiers owned no slaves, and 75% of all Southerners didn't either. Still, slavery was key to the South's economy, and enslaved people were forced to support the Army through physical labor. Many Native Americans supported the Confederacy. The last Confederate general to surrender was Cherokee leader Stand Watie. Other Native officers included Creek leader Daniel McIntosh. While the Union is praised for ending slavery, it also carried out genocide against Native Americans, with widespread killings and atrocities on the frontier. Notably, some of the first black soldiers, Buffalo Soldiers, assisted in these campaigns, filling gaps in Union troop numbers. Union generals like Custer later led massacres against Native communities, including scalping. Though the Confederacy is often compared to Nazi Germany, it was the Union that deployed a powerful government to invade territories and commit genocide. Similarities exist between the U.S. Army's westward expansion under Manifest Destiny and Nazi Germany's invasions, both involving mass killings. After broken treaties and stolen land by the U.S. government, many Cherokee and other Native groups allied with the Confederacy, seeing Southern independence as a chance for freedom. They became high-ranking officers and fought fiercely until the Confederacy's collapse. The Confederacy is often labeled as slavery's defender, but their Constitution prohibited bringing in new enslaved people, meaning no Confederate flag ever flew over ships transporting enslaved Africans. It also permitted new states or territories to join the Confederacy as free areas that banned slavery entirely, showing their stance was more nuanced than most assume. Abraham Lincoln wasn't on Southern ballots, but still became president, alarming Southerners who felt their rights and political power were slipping away. The North's larger population and waves of immigrants deepened cultural divides. The South relied on farming and family ties to the land, lacking the North's factories and crowded cities. Growing arguments over slavery, taxes, and states' rights made Southerners question leaving the Union. Most Southerners were descendants of early British settlers. While often labeled racist traitors, Confederates saw themselves as continuing America's fight for freedom. For example, Patrick Henry's grandson, who famously said, "Give me liberty or give me death," became a Confederate officer. Robert Tyler Jones, grandson of a U.S. president, carried the Confederate flag at Gettysburg under heavy fire. Confederate General Lewis Armistead, whose uncle defended the flag that inspired the national anthem, fought his close friend, Union General Winfield Hancock, at Gettysburg. Robert E. Lee, whose father fought alongside George Washington, led Confederate forces. Past examples like Vermont and Texas, leaving and rejoining the Union, made secession seem legal. After Lincoln's election, South Carolina voted to secede, followed by Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. Most federal forts were handed over peacefully, except Fort Sumter in Charleston. Confederates demanded its surrender, but Lincoln sent supply ships. Southern troops bombarded the fort, leading Lincoln to call 75,000 volunteers to invade the South. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, the right to a fair trial, jailed Maryland's leaders to stop secession, and blockaded Southern ports. Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee then joined the Confederacy, refusing to let Union troops attack fellow Southern states. Confederate President Jefferson Davis declared, "All we ask is to be let alone." The war began as a clash over self-rule. Southerners saw themselves as patriots like their revolutionary ancestors, while Lincoln's actions, jailing dissenters, seizing guns, and invading states, mirrored British oppression colonists once rebelled against. Union soldiers clashed with civilians, echoing the Boston Massacre. By 1861, the stage was set for America's bloodiest conflict, rooted in competing visions of liberty and government power. The Confederate Army was built from scratch, much like the American forces during the Revolution. Young volunteers rushed to enlist, inspired by pride and the belief they were creating a fairer nation. They argued that governments only rule with the people's consent, a principle inherited from the Revolutionary era. Around 200,000 soldiers joined in the war's early months. Regiments were organized locally, led by wealthy or educated officers. Early on, soldiers even voted for their own sergeants and lieutenants. The Confederacy gained an edge with experienced former U.S. Army leaders like Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and Jeb Stuart, all West Point graduates who resigned to fight for the South out of loyalty. Union generals often wasted lives in poorly planned attacks, while Confederates defended strategically. At the Battle of Fredericksburg in 1862, Union forces suffered 13,353 casualties compared to the Confederates' 4,576. First Bull Run in 1861 saw 2,950 Union losses versus 1,750 Confederate. The Wilderness in 1864 had 18,400 Union casualties to 11,400 Confederate. Spotsylvania Courthouse in 1864 saw 18,000 Union to 12,000 Confederate, and Cold Harbor in 1864 resulted in 13,000 Union casualties against just 2,500 Confederate. Despite ragged uniforms and starvation, Confederate troops fought fiercely. A woman who saw the Army of Northern Virginia in 1862 described their gaunt, hollow-eyed appearance, marveling that they could march or fight at all. Yet these soldiers halted Union advances at Antietam and inflicted heavy losses at Cold Harbor, Spotsylvania, and the Wilderness. Their resilience contrasted sharply with their worn-out appearance. The Union's costly tactics, like General Burnside's disastrous charge at Fredericksburg, where troops were slaughtered attacking Confederates behind a stone wall, highlighted the Confederates' defensive skill. Meanwhile, leaders like Lee and Jackson used terrain and speed to outmaneuver larger Union armies. Though outnumbered and under-resourced, the Confederacy held out for 4 years, fueled by soldiers who saw themselves as defending their homes and rights, much like their ancestors in 1776. Facing a manpower shortage, the Confederacy introduced a draft in 1862. Their system worked better than the North's. All white men aged 18 to 35 had to serve, and hiring substitutes was banned. Many older or younger men still volunteered. Most Confederate soldiers were farmers. Unlike Union troops, few were immigrants. Southern troops fought with more passion than practical Northerners. Their famous rebel yell terrified even battle-hardened Union soldiers. Confederates felt deeply committed, believing they defended their homes, families, and way of life. General Lee captured this spirit in 1864. If we win, we gain everything. If we lose everything. As defeat neared, religious revivals swept Confederate camps, with soldiers praying and singing hymns. But they couldn't match Union resources. For every Northerner killed, another arrived with fresh gear. Union armies burned Southern cities like Atlanta and Richmond, while desperate Confederates fought harder, causing heavy Union losses. At the war's end, Union commanders saluted Confederate bravery. For example, the 45th North Carolina started with 2,597 men and ended with just 88 soldiers and 7 officers. Such losses were common after 4 years of non-stop fighting. Jefferson Davis vowed, "This war won't end until our generation is dead or you recognize our right to govern ourselves. We fight for independence, not slavery. Independence or extinction." Before the Civil War erupted, Thailand's King Rama IV, Mongkut, discovered a curious gap in American resources: no elephants. The diplomatic monarch deemed this an urgent deficiency requiring remedy. When sectional tensions exploded into war, he saw his chance. In 1861, he penned a letter to Abraham Lincoln offering unlimited war elephants, insisting they could smash Confederate lines, haul artillery, build fortifications, or simply roam wild to establish breeding populations. Lincoln's reply blended gratitude and bemused practicality. "I appreciate most highly your Majesty's tender of good offices, but our territory lies too far north for elephants to thrive." While declining gracefully, the president left unspoken logistical nightmares, feeding 10-ton beasts on battlefields or Confederate sharpshooters targeting Mayhouts. Yet, as war dragged into 1864 to 65 with horrific casualties, historians speculate Lincoln might have recalled Mongkut's letter wistfully. A charging elephant division could have shattered trenches at Petersburg, while trunk-equipped sappers might have rebuilt war-torn railroads faster. The Siamese king's earnest but impractical offer remains history's most surreal what-if of Civil War logistics. In 1858, a bitter political showdown in the U.S. Capitol gave Americans their first clear warning of the fractures to come. Congress had spent days arguing over Kansas's proposed statehood constitution, a document allowing slavery while banning free black people from living there, provisions that infuriated Northern Republicans. Exhausted lawmakers debated past midnight, many drinking whiskey and wine to stay awake. At 1:30 a.m., deeply intoxicated Democrat Lawrence Kite stood up and sneered at Republican Galusha Grow, calling him a black Republican pup. Grow fired back with racist taunts of his own, with both sides hurling insults until Kite suddenly lunged at Grow. The chamber instantly descended into chaos. The House Speaker tried stopping the fight by hammering the House mace, but some thought he was signaling to attack. A congressman grabbed a heavy brass spittoon and cracked it against a rival's head. The brawl turned dangerous when William Barksdale got trapped in a headlock, taking multiple blows to the skull. After breaking free, he realized his wig had fallen off during the struggle. Red-faced and flustered, Barksdale snatched it from the floor, but accidentally stuck it on backward. The sight of his lopsided hairpiece made the entire house roar with laughter, draining the anger from the room. Legislators finally settled down and reached a grudging agreement. The clash proved how quickly tensions could turn violent, but also how a single humanizing moment, a man's botched wig, could disarm even the bitterest rivals. While Civil War battles dominate history books, soldiers faced a deadlier foe in camp: rampant disease. 2/3 of all military deaths stemmed from illness rather than bullets, a product of squalid conditions where open latrines sat upstream from drinking water and lice-infested blankets served as beds. Dysentery reigned as the war's top killer, with chronic diarrhea afflicting 99% of troops annually. The Tennessee Trots didn't discriminate. Generals and grunts alike spent battles clutching their guts between volleys. This crisis birthed one of warfare's strangest protocols: unofficial latrine truces, where neither side fired at men relieving themselves mid-battle. As one Wisconsin soldier wrote, "Rebs waved handkerchiefs when nature called. We returned the courtesy next morning." The phrase "good guts" entered military lexicon not as metaphor for courage, but literal survival criteria. Men who couldn't withstand months of intestinal torment died dehydrated in fever tents, their bowels turned to water. Field surgeons categorized stool samples like artillery grades: mild, galloping, or cannonade diarrhea. Ironically, germ theory emerged during the war's final years, too late for most. While Minier balls claimed 110,000 lives, dysentery and typhoid slaughtered over 300,000. Even amputees had better survival odds than soldiers who drank from parasite-filled canteens. The conflict's true legacy? Proving an army marches on its stomach and dies by its bowels. The first major clashes of the war erupted just weeks later, on July 21, 1861. Some 30,000 Union troops marched south to Centerville, Virginia, preparing for what Northerners called the First Battle of Bull Run, known to Confederates as First Manassas. The fighting unfolded mere miles from Washington, D.C., where residents treated the conflict as weekend spectacle. Early war optimism convinced civilians the Union would crush rebels effortlessly, so hundreds packed picnic baskets and rode out to watch like it was a sporting event. At dawn, caravans of curious civilians streamed toward the rolling Virginia countryside. Well-dressed spectators staked claims on hillside perches. One woman peered through opera glasses, gasping, "How splendid!" and "My, isn't this first-rate?" as cannon fire began. Emboldened by their audience, some soldiers broke formation to banter with onlookers, narrating the action like theater. A few reckless civilians crept dangerously close to the front lines, ignoring officers' warnings. The mood shifted when Confederate forces rallied. A sudden cavalry charge thundered toward overconfident spectators who'd wandered onto the field. Some were captured as prisoners, others vanished in the chaos. Panicked civilians abandoned their champagne baskets and parasols, fleeing in terror back to Washington through clouds of dust and gun smoke. This disastrous picnic battle became a wake-up call. Both sides realized this war would be bloodier and longer than anyone had imagined. New York's Elmira Prison became the Andersonville of the North, a hellish compound designed for 5,000 that swelled to 10,200 Confederates by 1864 after prisoner exchanges collapsed. The overcrowded camp festered with sewage ditches flooding barracks, while winter temperatures plunged to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet locals treated it like a macabre zoo. Entrepreneurs built twin 40-foot observation towers across Water Street, advertising camp viewing, 15 cents adults, 5 cents children. Gawkers ascended with opera glasses and picnic baskets, cheering when emaciated prisoners staged mock minstrel shows or firewalking acts. One diary records a prisoner shouting, "Enjoy the show, Yankees? We'll dance on your graves." Guards eventually tore down one tower, not from compassion, but because prisoners were flashing obscene shadow puppets. The other remained open as typhoid and scurvy ravaged the camp. Visitors kept arriving even as skeletal inmates collapsed mid-performance. 2,933 would die from malnutrition and frozen limbs, their bodies stored in death house iceboxes until spring thaw allowed burial. The camp's sole dignity came from African-American sexton John W. Jones, who secretly recorded each Confederate's name and home county as he buried them. His ledgers later became vital reconciliation documents, even as Elmira's observation tower prophets funded Union artillery. In 1861, the University of Mississippi became a Confederate allegory in miniature. 135 of its 139 students enlisted, abandoning classrooms to form the University Greys. The Oxford campus transformed into a sprawling hospital, its lecture halls reeking of gangrene as 4 students too young to serve mopped bloodied floors. This scholar regiment marched under a banner stitched from a professor's robe, their initial orders sending them to First Bull Run. Fate intervened when their train derailed near Manassas, delaying arrival. Colonel W. H. Moore, their commander, became the Greys' first casualty days earlier. His revolver discharged during a drunken toast, blowing off 2 toes. The students finally saw combat at 1862's Seven Pines, where 19-year-old philosophy major Thomas Walton wrote, "We charge not with rebel yells, but Virgil's verses." By Gettysburg's 3rd day, only 23 Greys remained. Assigned to Armistead's brigade during Pickett's charge, they breached Union lines at the angle, one clutching a Euripides text in his haversack. None survived the retreat. A Pennsylvania soldier later found their banner wrapped around a dead color-bearer, Aeschylus's Agamemnon pages stuffed in his shirt. The university reopened in 1865, with 93 widows attending memorial services, their lost sons memorialized by 135 empty desks in still bullet-scarred classrooms. By 1863, Southern life under Union naval sieges resembled a waking nightmare. The Anaconda Plan's grip choked off salt, medicine, and cloth. Coffee cost $12 per pound, a month's wage, while rats sold as meat in Richmond markets. As Christmas approached, parents faced impossible choices: explain war's cruelty or preserve childhood magic. Some spun battlefield horror into a holiday myth. Alabama fathers claimed Yankee sharpshooters downed Santa's reindeer mid-flight. Georgia mothers whispered that bluebellies imprisoned St. Nick at Fort Delaware. A Tennessee girl later recalled her brother sobbing, "Do they make Santa pick lice like Papa does in camp?" Kinder lies blamed logistics. Old Claus's sleigh can't dodge Admiral Porter's cannons, Virginia parents reasoned, hiding turnip dolls behind their backs. The psychological toll emerged in diaries. One Georgia woman described childhood nights studying smuggled Union maps, plotting Santa's route past Charleston's blockade fleet. "I'd move toy ships, crying, 'They'll catch him,' till Mama burned the maps," she wrote. The cruelty backfired strategically. When Union troops captured Vicksburg, they distributed Santa's delayed gifts, captured Confederate sugar and lemons. Children's letters flooded Lincoln. "Please tell Santa we're good rebels." For generations, Southern families retold these stories not as war losses, but as first betrayals, the moment innocents learned Yankee meant monster. February 1864, Dalton, Georgia. Robert E. Lee's Army of Tennessee awoke to a crystalline anomaly: 5 inches of snow blanketing their rifle pits. For boys raised on Dixie's red clay, this white marvel sparked instant rebellion against war's gloom. Before officers could intervene, 20,000 frostbitten Confederates, some barefoot, most under 20, launched history's most epic snowball brawl. The 1st Tennessee and 3rd Georgia regiments formed rival armies, sculpting icy forts and stockpiling frozen ammunition. Colonel William Gordon of the 42nd Tennessee galloped through the fray on his sorrel mare, waving a coffee-stained neckerchief as battle colors while pelting his own men. "We've Yankee substitutes today, lads," he roared, ducking a snow salvo from Alabama artillerymen turned pranksters. Military discipline fueled the chaos. Cavalry cadets executed flanking maneuvers, ambushing enemies with snow-packed haversacks. A Virginia private's diary records, "We formed square like Waterloo, hurling volleys till our fingers froze, then charged with bayonets of icicles." Captured prisoners endured snow dumped down their backs, their shrieks echoing across Missionary Ridge. The merriment peaked when General Patrick Cleburne's staff arrived, only to be mobbed by snowball-wielding teens. "You'll court-martial the whole army, sir," laughed a major as Cleburne wiped slush from his epaulets. By afternoon, temperatures melted both snow and respite. The Tennesseans trudged back to trenches, their laughter dying as Union cannons resumed shelling. That night, 17-year-old Henry Morton of the Grays wrote, "For 3 hours we remembered being boys. Tomorrow we'll die like men." Within weeks, half the snowball warriors fell at Resaca, their frozen carnival preserved in letters home, stained with later tears. During May 1864's Battle of the Wilderness, Union and Confederate troops at Saunders Field witnessed warfare's strangest duel. As Northern forces pressed their advantage, a fleeing rebel dove into a rain-carved gully for cover, only to find a Yankee soldier already crouched there. The enemies now shared a ditch barely wider than a coffin, muskets aimed at each other's chests. "You're my prisoner," hissed the Confederate. "Like hell I am." "You jumped into my hole," the Union man retorted. With neither willing to shoot, the blast would deafen them both, they struck a deal. Settle custody rights with bare-knuckle boxing. Emerging from the gully, the scrapping pair drew stares from both battle lines. A Georgia sergeant later wrote, "We forgot our rifles. Here was better sport than killing." For 7 minutes the army stood silent as the men brawled, the Confederate landing haymakers, the Yankee countering with jabs. When the Northerner finally collapsed, spitting blood, the victor helped him up. "Now come on back proper-like," the rebel said, steering his dazed captive into their shared shelter. The battle roared back until dusk, Minié balls whizzing over the gully where victor and vanquished now shared canteen sips. True to their improvised rules, the Union soldier surrendered formally when the shooting stopped, though his captor lost him during the chaotic retreat. Coffee became the unsung fuel of Civil War combatants, particularly for Union troops who treated their daily brew with near-religious devotion. Historical records show the word coffee appears more often in Northern soldiers' journals than terms like bullet, Lincoln, or even mother. The Union Army issued staggering annual rations, 36 pounds of beans per soldier, enough to brew 10 cups of strong Java every dawn. This obsession birthed battlefield innovations. The Sharps Rifle Company actually produced firearms with built-in coffee grinders in the stock, a feature soldiers used more than the trigger during long months of camp life. With troops seeing combat just 14 days annually on average, grinders often wore out faster than gun barrels. Meanwhile, Confederate troops suffered through caffeine deprivation due to Union naval blockades. Desperate rebels roasted acorns, chicory, even sweet potatoes until charred black, creating a bitter coffee substitute devoid of real caffeine. Letters describe men trading precious tobacco rations for stolen Union coffee grounds. The stimulant's strategic value became undeniable. Union General Benjamin Butler famously timed attacks for mid-morning, when his men peaked after their second brewing. "A caffeinated regiment fights like 3 sober ones," he claimed after 1864's Battle of Proctor's Creek. Medical officers noted coffee drinkers marched longer and reloaded faster, an edge that arguably shortened the war. So here's the question the history books won't ask. What's stranger, the war we just unearthed, or the fact